Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello. Greetings. Okay, it's time to begin. Everybody in your assigned seats, pews. Absent.
I'm here.
Okay, we are in Isaiah 5 this morning. Read about a number one hit on the Jerusalem radio. Isaiah 5 is an interesting chapter. Isaiah's been leading up to, it's sort of been, I guess you could say, a repetitive type of thing. God's, encouraged them, come, let us reason together. Here's the promise. Here's what it can be. Here's what you are. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And there's been a repetitive sort of presentation on that kind of thing. When you get to Isaiah 5, it seems like there's no hope for redemption. They've gone past the point of being redeemed. So, in other words, the people have not repented, and so it's too late. Judgment's coming. And so Isaiah 5 sort of is a neat way of presenting what's wrong, and it's done through a song. And one of the interesting things about this song about the vineyard is it is picked up by Jesus in the Gospels. But in regard to the song itself, it illustrates a relationship that's gone sour. And so I've got the full text of the song here, but we're talking about, this is a long chapter, 30 verses. And so I wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of what the song is saying, because everything is going back to the song that's sung. Now, it's very difficult with a prophet to know when God is speaking or the prophet is speaking. It's like it goes in and out. And so you think of it in regard to the song. There's a song about my well-beloved and the vineyard, and it sounds almost like Isaiah talking. And then later, it's God talking, but you have to understand that Isaiah is representing God in the presentation of the vision. Now, what I gather is in the original presentation of this, before it's written down by Isaiah, it seems to have been something that was presenting among the people, that they were listening to this. Because the way that the song is constructed and the question is asked to the audience, I can see Isaiah, who's using in the introduction of his sermon a song that's about something that everybody is familiar with, a vineyard back in ancient days. Everybody knows what you do with the vineyard and how hard it is and what one has to do and all of this. So he's going to be playing off of the knowledge of the people, particularly when he raises the question, what else could I have done? Will be a question that Isaiah raises, God raises in regard to his, work on the vineyard. And it's not difficult to imagine that the people would say, well, there's nothing else you could have done, as Isaiah is talking about this. And in doing that, they convict them on their own selves. They show that God is right and true in what he's about to do. So when you read this, follow the structure with me. So we're looking, first of all, in the first 7 verses, we have a promising relationship, but it's gone sour. The song starts out with, words of beauty. We have a love song. It's about a vineyard. He says, "Let me sing now for my well-beloved, a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard." So let's take that as the long title of the song. So call up the radio station Jerusalem and says, "I want to play for me, a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard." Okay? So that's sort of the theme. This is the song. Now the words of the song come next. "My well-beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hill. He dug it all around, removed the stones, and planted it with the choicest vine. And he built a tower in the middle of it, and also hewed out a wine vat in it. Then he expected it to produce good grapes, but it produced only worthless ones." Okay? So that's the song. So I want us to look at some of the things that are in these verses here. It is a song about a relationship. The words "well-beloved," being used. This is also a phrase that's used in regard to God's people in different places in the Old Testament. It's hard for me to see whether the prophet's speaking or God's speaking, because there's a sort of a figure of a person doing something as it's being told. So it's like, okay, let's look at this. Look at the scene, and this is what is being done. The first thing I want you to see is that this vineyard was planted on a what? A fertile hill. What does that imply? Yeah, it's good ground. Okay, this would be what a farmer wants. This is good soil, and so that is the sort of the springboard. Okay, the perfect place is found. The soil is good. It's a fertile hill, and then notice what is done in order to make sure the vineyard is healthy and grows and is defended and has everything that it needs to do what vineyards do. So he digs, he removes stones. Anybody that's done any agricultural work, gardening or whatever, you might have fertile soil, but there might be rocks in there and various things that you have to remove to make it even better. And he planted with the choicest vine. Okay, what does that imply? I mean, it's good seed. This is not secondhand stuff. This is the choicest, premium. He says, and he built a tower. What was a tower used for in a vineyard? What? Okay, well, this particular tower is a watchtower. You're right, but this one would be referring to a watchtower in which the vine dresser or whatever would be sure to protect from whatever could come and either steal or destroy or harm the vineyard. Then, which is placed in the middle of it. He also hewed out a wine vat. I've seen some of these in Israel, where you have a cistern that's sort of hewed out of the ground. It's a lot of times it's a rocky place, and they put plaster or whatever to make it hold and contain water. But for one to have that expense to do that, you're expecting something, right? So all of that is getting ready for the harvest. And so the emphasis here is he dug, he planted, he built, he hewed, and then he expected. And it's interesting, you have a change in pronoun. He expected this, but it. That's important. But it produced only worthless ones, worthless grapes. This word comes from a word in Hebrew that describes something that's foul and smells, it stinks. You can imagine it's like it's terrible. It's not just sour. I mean, someone could eat a sour grape, but it's bad. It stinks. So that's the song that's left for everybody who in that day would understand a vineyard. The question is raised. In Isaiah 5 and verse 3, we go to a one-sided relationship, which is what the emphasis is. He says, and I picture Isaiah probably saying this to a crowd that's listening to it. He says, "What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it?" What would the audience say? Nothing. What should I do? Burn it to the ground. Get rid of everything, and start over or something. Well, he then says, why? And that's going to be important because the answer is going to be given as to why God's going to do what he's doing. Why, when I expected it to produce good grapes, did it produce worthless ones, stinky, foul grapes? Grapes good for nothing. So why? Well, then, the emphasis here in this part, you got a promising relationship that begins. Everything is prepared. You can see God's handiwork in preparing the nation of Israel and all that. Everything's done. His protection, his love, his support, his encouragement, all of the things that God has been doing in the Old Testament. And that's the only side of the relationship that's been doing anything, is God. From the standpoint of the people, it's all one-sided. And so we come to a broken relationship in verses 5 through 7 when we get to the application. After the audience already condemns itself, there's nothing more to be done, Then he says, so now let me tell you what so here's the I here with the prophet saying it. So it's kind of like in and out, as you almost get a sense that the prophet's talking and God's talking, but that's the way prophets are. It's kind of like one and the same because they are speaking God's word. They're God's mouthpiece. So he says, this is what I'm going to do to my vineyard. We have an emphasis again on God's activity. See that? In the first part, he said, it's kind of like in third person. He dug, he planted, he built, he hewed, and he expected. Now it becomes more intense. Where he says, I will remove its hedge and it will be consumed. I will break down its wall and it will become trampled ground. Again, I want you to notice the things that I have underlined are words that are used in parallel form with phrases. So we got hedge equals wall, consumed equals trampled ground. Then we have a section that's extended. I will lay it waste. How? It will not be pruned or hoed, but briars and thorns will come up. Here's a I'm not going to do this, and this is what's going to happen. We would call that antithetical parallelism in studying the the Psalms and the prophets and the poetry of Israel. Now, all of us know, okay, if you don't prune, you don't take care of things, what happens? It becomes overgrown. And it may all have started, I see so many landscapes like this. Being a landscape, it's just something you notice, that everybody starts out with their little plants. And because they're little, they don't anticipate them growing, so they put them too close together, because they're little. It says, wow, man, it's too much space there. But in 2 or 3 years, you find out that this thing is supposed to get like 5 feet wide, and now it's in each other. Then you have plants that are planted too close to the house. Because they're little, you think they're far away, but they're not. If you plant it out here, you say, that looks strange, it's so far away. But when it gets mature, you see, it's going to be up on the house. So many, if you drive through the neighborhoods, you can see how things have overgrown. And they have run into each other. And what, in the anticipation of a beautiful landscape, because of how and where the plants were planted, and that it wasn't hoed or, it wasn't pruned and, shaped, then it's just a mess. And so they called me, and I'd go in and pull up all of those plants and replant them. That's how landscapers made their money. We come in and we pull all the plants up. I get my truck, I get a chain, and I put it around a boxwood that's gotten so big, and just take it out of the ground and have to replant everything in anticipation of its growth. But everybody understands, we understand that. And they understood that in regard to the meticulous nature and how a vineyard, needs to be cared for. So if everything was done and properly done, and God is the one who's doing it, nothing's held back. It's not in the flaw of God's character or that he forgot something. Oops, I forgot to fertilize, or forgot to treat, things for insects, or, I forgot to pick off a branch that had a disease before it got into everything. Those things happened, but God was faithfully managing all of this. So why, when I expected, good grapes, it produced worthless ones? So, because it did, and everybody knows that though taken care of, and though everything was done, that the vineyard is useless. And so the only thing that needs to be done is clear it out and take it away. So the emphasis becomes God acting. It's he did this, he did this, he did this, as almost told by Isaiah. And then Isaiah speaking as God, I will remove its hedge. The protection of the vineyard, I will break down its wall, I will lay it waste. Okay? Then I will also charge the clouds to rain no rain on it. So here's the result that is going to take place. This is the consequence of why, or the consequence of not producing these choice vines, not producing what should have been expected. Then verse 7, you can tell how this is sort of the way Jesus taught. If you think about it, he would tell a parable, and everybody would be, yeah, that's right. And then he'd give the application, like, who's the neighbor? Who showed neighbor? Who was the neighbor to the one fell among the thieves? And, they had to answer correctly, even though it condemned them in giving the correct answer. So then we have, Isaiah says, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his delightful plant. Notice the opposite, the X structure here on this. The vineyard is equal to delightful plant. See that? And then house of Israel is equal to men of Judah. What I'm illustrating here is the way Hebrew brings attention to things and keeps people's interest in reading. It's very apparent in Hebrew. I'm not even showing you the word plates that are done. That is, words that sound alike. Okay? This is a way of getting attention. It's kind of like, y'all like to have a cliffhanger, in a show or whatever, a cliffhanger, or turn, like that. Yeah, why do they do that? Because it's kind of like it breeds new interest, a new curiosity. And so these are structural ways in which Hebrew is written to maintain the audience's attention. We have, then he looked for justice, but behold bloodshed. Do you remember in Isaiah 1, who's this trampling of my courts? When you lift your hands in prayer, what do I say? You remember? What was it that God saw when Israel lifted up their hands to pray? Bloodshed. Your hands are full of blood. See, that theme is carried forth. Here we have a reemphasis of this, that your hands are full of bloodshed. For righteousness, but behold, a cry of distress. The cry of distress is defining or helping us see what bloodshed is. Bloodshed is not just murder. It's used metaphorically to describe a whole host of distress, wrong things. Even John used it in the New Testament to talk about, if one doesn't love his brother, then he's a what? He's a murderer. Well, you may not be murdering your, fellow brother in Christ, but if you hate that individual, you despise the individual, then it's tantamount, metaphorically, to murder. So you have the language exaggerated to get the attention, you see. Because by saying that, one begins to think, what? Maybe it will help someone not have the kind of attitude that they ought to have toward a brother or sister. So justice and righteousness are used together in this parallel thing, and then bloodshed and cry of distress. So this is the application of the song. Now, in chapter 5, I'm convinced that a lot of things that we read in chapters 1 through 5 have already occurred. It's kind of like you're backdating it, and we're getting a preview of things that are going to happen. And it's like, in regard to God's promises and God's judgment, it's as sure as if it happened, in the past. And in the recording of this and writing it down, this is one reason why a lot of people in studying Isaiah, you have a difficult time with chronology in the Bible, particularly with the prophets, because the prophets are not necessarily interested in chronology of things, but in the thematic structure that has a religious intent to it. So that's why I like to look at the structure and the themes. So we move from this song and the those two who have been identified, God and his vineyard, promising relationship that went sour. It's a one-sided relationship, and now it's broken. So when it's reached the broken part, there's no redemption here. because we'll see in the rest of the chapter, they reach the point of no return. Judgment is coming. And so, in order to kind of emphasize this, we have 6 woes. Now, a woe oracle, a woe phrase is a phrase of imminent destruction. It's it's, too late. The party's over for you guys. The judgment, the discipline, the spanking, that's what's coming. And there's 6 of them. In the 6 woes, you get what specifically caused the grapes to stink. Okay? So, first of all, and what I've done, of course, I don't have, I can't put all of Isaiah 5 on a sheet. So I've given you the highlight and the structure for you to, when you read it on your own now with this idea of structure in your minds and how it's flowing together, maybe it will be a little bit more meaningful and you'll understand it better. So we have the specifics that answers why, when I expected it to produce good grapes, it produced sour. The woes represent the why. It's the answer. So, the people are greedy. Notice in verse 8 of Isaiah 5 it says, "Woe to those who add house to house and join field to field until there is no room." Now you have to understand this comes in the shadow of the Torah, the law of Moses, in regard to how they were to protect the poor and others who were in need. We know this in regard to the harvesting of their crops. That they were to leave the marginal areas, unharvested, so the poor would have something to harvest and to bring in. What we're finding here is the implication that inheritance, property rights are being skewed, and they're not honoring these things. And property was an important thing among the people of Israel. And God's very specific in the law of Moses concerning property rights, inheritance, the year of Jubilee, when all debt, it's everything that's, taken or whatever, it's given back to the original household, the family. Whatever is taken, to pay debt, in the year of Jubilee is given back to the family. And so it's a way of maintaining, the identity of the tribes and the families who are comprising Israel. Now, here, look at chapter 5. I'll read a little bit more here, and you'll see what's happening. He says, "Woe to those who add house to house, join field to field, until there is no room, so that you have to live alone in the midst of the land. In my years, the Lord of hosts has sworn, surely many houses shall become desolate." There's a greed and confiscation that's happening here by those who are in power and those who have means. They're grabbing, extending their borders, property. And so it's illegitimate in this woe, because this is one of the things that God is responding to. So woe to them. The other thing in Isaiah 5, in verse 11, it's woe to those, now this is interesting, who rise early in the morning that they may pursue strong drink, who stay up late in the evening that wine may inflame them. So notice they rising up early in the morning, which equals, opposite, late in the evening, they're doing the same thing. They rise up to drink, and in the evening, they're inflamed with drink. So the people are corrupt. This isn't a good thing. You usually early to rise, go to work, be the solid citizen. But what if the prospects of your day is in the pursuit of something, of debauchery and all of that? Well, that's how he's describing the why as to why the grapes stink. The people are corrupt. Now let's read a little bit more of this. Verse 11. He says, their banquets are accompanied by the lyre and the harp, by tambourine, the flute, and by wine. But they do not pay attention to the deeds of the Lord, nor do they consider the work of his hands. See, it's all focused around their pleasure, feeding their base, instincts and things that they want to do, their base self, the flesh, as Paul would call it. So this is the next woe. This is why God's coming in judgment against them. Isaiah 5 and verse 20 is the next woe. He says, no, I'll skip one. Verse 18. Woe to those who drag iniquity with the cords of falsehood, and sin as if with cart ropes, who say, let him make speed, let him hasten his word, that we may see it, and let the purpose of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come to pass, that we may know. Now, in verse 18, the iniquity here, the dragging the iniquity, is tantamount to sin. And you have cords of falsehood or cart ropes. Now think of a cart that you would put supplies on, okay? And you have ropes that are hooked to, beasts of burden, horses, mules, or whatever, okay? And so you're taking the supplies, which the supplies would be useful for something, one's sustenance, building material, whatever, removing rocks out of this and that, whatever a person needs to do, be productive. Here the image is that instead of the mules, you have an individual, and the supplies are what? What are the supplies that he has? And he's going place to place, dragging what? His sin and iniquity. Okay? So the thing is the people have chosen foolishly. See, what does the Bible say? The fool has said in his heart, what? There is no God. And that's what verse 19 is indicating. They don't believe God is coming. They don't believe in the judgment. They don't believe in anything that he said. Else they would not be carrying their sin with, cords of rope, walking around in broad daylight. It's somewhat how our modern age is. Sin is getting bolder in our culture. Would you agree with that? It's getting bolder. And in a sense, you have people carrying carts of sin or dragging carts of sin in broad daylight that announces and declares, we don't believe in this God thing. It's what Peter faced. Some would reason, it's been so long since, whatever God, and he hadn't come now, he's not going to come. It's never going to come. It's kind of like a uniformity of things. He hasn't come yet. Has Jesus come back yet? No, he hasn't come back. What makes you think he's going to come, anytime soon? Or even if he's going to come. That's the same in 2 Peter chapter 1 that people were thinking in regard to their lives, and they were beginning to engage in sin and walk in a sinful way. And then Peter says, I need to remind you that there was a day when God created, okay, and that God judged the world, Noah's day, and that same word tells us that there's going to be a day of judgment. So it doesn't matter how long things have elapsed. And we're already, we're 2,000 years since the first century. That's a long time for us to let down our guard, as some would think. That's why you have in the book of Revelation, Jesus is coming soon. Come soon. There was an expectation of life in view of that, not knowing when he's coming. We are to live because he can. It could be now, tonight, tomorrow. I don't know. But that's what's going on in regard to them dragging their sin around. They're fools. They're acting like fools. A fool is one who denies God. He's not stupid. She's not ignorant. She's a fool. He's a fool. That's how the psalmist uses it. So, if you deny and you choose the foolish way, then this is what you'll do. You'll do your own thing. You'll decide your own right and wrong, or what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, which is what our culture has done. And then we get to Isaiah 5, verse 20, man, it becomes really in your face as you see what's happening back in Isaiah's day and what's happening today. Look at Isaiah 5 and verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Then he extends it out, okay? You call good evil and evil good. Then he says, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness. Then he extends it out one more time and says, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Now that's good structure. That's good Hebrew poetry, a way of emphasizing things. You get the point, right? There's no way to miss the point. James uses this. Why? For those who are acting in an ungodly way, are using their tongue in a wrong way, okay, and what they say and how they speak to others. How can fresh water produce bitter water? You know, how can bitter water produce fresh water? And it's the same kind of structure in teaching that Isaiah is doing here. That's borrowed by our apostles and prophets of the first century, being inspired by the Spirit. So we have a people who are perverted. You call a male a female a male. You can extend it. I mean, we could extend it, ad infinitum, they say. Continue to go. So what does perversion mean? You're turning things upside down, which is what was happening when the book of Romans was written. In Romans 1, when he talked about the failure of the Gentiles, and they were given over to their passions, men with men, and doing those things which are unseemly. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, what is normal? We know what normal is, don't we? Sure, most people do. But that's not emphasized today. If you're normal in regard to what God says a person is, and all of this, you're abnormal. You're only significant if you identify something else. Or doesn't it seem strange? Do y'all have this same kind of angst that I do in regard to these things? I mean, I can't imagine in some areas, in public schools and universities, what it must be like. It wasn't like that when I was in school. And I can't imagine. It's turning things around. Well, we're raising a generation of kids that are accepting that kind of thing, who see that as perfectly normal. Some adults have gotten caught up in it. People can love whoever they want, do whatever they want. Well, I mean, God's given the free will, but just don't call that normal. It's not. It's perverted. You can't use the word perverted anymore, I don't think. You can't say anything that would be against what anybody is doing, because in so doing, you're being judgmental. I mean, we're being locked in. And it's just strange that you have smart people accepting this kind of stuff. Pressure, the dollar, the doling out of things. There's a lot of things that are encouraging this kind of stuff. So the people are perverted. The people are arrogant. Isaiah 5, verse 21. He says, woe to them who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. See the parallelism? Wise and clever, eyes and sight. The people are unholy. Look at Isaiah 5, verse 22. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink. Now, think of this. What's a valiant man? A soldier. One who goes into battle. You think of David and his valiant ones who went and fought, and the heroes would be those who are strong and examples and what people want. But the heroes of Israel are those who say, go, 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 go. And they're heroes and valiant in drinking wine, drinking strong drink. That's the hero. Gaston. He says, who justify, notice this, the wicked for a bribe and take away the rights of ones who are in the right. You see, money, the material things, that was emphasized in chapter 1 as well. So those are the woes. Then we get a preview of judgment. The reason for the preview and what's coming is stated again in verse 24. For they have rejected what? The law of the Lord of hosts, and have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. So rejecting the word is tantamount to rejecting God. See the connection there? So you tell me that the word of God, the scripture, is not important. What's your attitude toward the word of God? You reject the word of God. Jesus even said that. You reject my words. You don't receive them, then you have one who judges you. The words which I have spoken, the same shall judge you the same, last day. So the wedge that people put in that, we're bibliolatry, we're worshiping words here. No, we see this as God's message to us. It's not the book, it's the message. It's the law of God that's been revealed. You can't make those two different things. The Word is God. God is the Word. See, to reject this, which seems a little less, is to reject God. Some say, well, I love God, and this down here, serve a purpose, but it's not this purpose. They go together. He says, verse 25 is the thing that's going to happen. For all this, his anger is not spent, and his hand is still stretched out. This is in regard to God. God's hand, though he's already judging, what hasn't he done? He hasn't removed it. It's still stretched out. What does that imply? There's more to come. Okay? Then we get to Isaiah 6, where we have God And then we start seeing the more to come. If one looks to the land, behold, there is darkness and distress, even the light of darkness in the clouds. You remember the theme of light and darkness. It was in the previous chapters. In chapter 9, there was a light that shines. You know, a son is born. And you shall call his name Wonderful Counselor, all this. So there's this theme of light. Walk in the light, Isaiah says. Well, they obviously didn't, and so they've been spanked. That didn't help. They've been sent to the room. That didn't do anything. They've been scolded. That didn't do anything. They've had things taken away from them. That didn't work. So now, you know, the vineyard's going to be uprooted, and God's going to be the one who stands as holy. Huh? Yep, that's right. Thank you.